This is Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society BC, brought to you by Sitka Gear. Come along as we bring conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Frontiersman Gear. Thank you, Sitka Gear and Frontiersman Gear, for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. Good evening, gentlemen. Here we are on Talk is Sheep, back in the studio. We got Gregory and bringing in hot Kaden Romain just before the season opener here of Stone Sheep in BC. How's it going, man?
Pretty good, man. Pretty good. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome. Well, I'm looking at your studio there, and you got all kinds of giant mule deer and big sheep. So I think we got the right guy on the podcast. I'll have to say that right now.
And everyone gets lucky.
Yeah, it's funny though, and we're going to talk about this exact thing today. Is some guys get luckier than others. So, yeah, pretty cool. Gregory, good to see you. It's been a while since we've both been on. Welcome back.
Yeah, no, I've just been hiding in the shadows, lurking. So finally got time to join you.
That's awesome. Are you going stone sheep hunting this fall, Greg?
No.
Okay.
I'm kids got elk draws, so we're gonna focus on that, and that'll be my time.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty noble pursuit by all means. So,
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, so we're recording this on July 15th. I think we're going to try and drop this one tomorrow morning. And on that note, just for anyone that's listening, today, the 16th, if we do drop it, if I can get my act together, we're doing a horn aging webinar on July 16th at 7 p.m. So go to wildsheepsociety.com, check it out. We'd love to have you guys there. So we've been doing lots of these Mountain Ready series, and Kaden's dedicated member of the Wild Sheep Society BC and hardcore hunter. And we were talking a little bit before we went live, Kaden, about how there's guys that are consistently delivering, bringing home the bacon, and then there's other people that just never really able to get it done. So hoping we can touch a little bit on that today. And I think it's really appropriate for our Mountain Ready series because I think you have a lot to offer. I've heard you on other platforms for sure. You're on Spike Camp and you did a great job there. And it's just one thing that's consistent is when you look at Kaden's Instagram at the end of sheep season, you're probably going to see some dead stuff.
Yeah, I've been pretty fortunate over the years to be on a couple really good trips, but you know what? Instagram is the highlights of everyone's lives. Those pictures don't show you the countless miles walked without any sheep being seen or anything like that. So it definitely didn't start that way. I mean, a little bit about myself. I got into sheep hunting, I guess, fairly early compared to most people, but I was born and raised. We were just mule deer hunters, hunting deer and moose around home in the interior. And then we started going up north looking for elk. Uh, as the elk were harder and harder to find, we just kept walking back farther and farther until we started seeing these little specks high on the mountain, and they were sheep. So yeah, my dad started doing that for a couple of years, and then I started going up with him, and we didn't really have anyone to kind of show us the ropes. We were pretty much just kind of self-learned for the most part, and it took a lot of years in order to first find success, and then for success to come fairly consistently, I guess you could say.
Kaden, when would you say that, give or take, like how long ago was that when you kind of went on that first hunt of yours, first sheep? Like obviously you've been hunting since you were a kid, but when you started chasing sheep, how long ago was that?
I'd say I think the very first serious sheep only hunt went on a couple August 1st trips, probably around like '08, '09, 2010 or so. And we were green, like super green. In fact, one of the stories I told before is we boated up the river and we were told about an area and we got off the river on the wrong side of the river and hiked the wrong mountain completely. It wasn't until like 2 days later from a mountaintop that we looked back and we thought, hey, that looks like the area that we were supposed to be in. It was like 20 kilometers away. So we were seriously clueless, but you have to put in the time in order to get that knowledge. That knowledge can't just be downloaded from someone. You could have the best sheep hunter ever, and he could tell you everything he knows, but you're not going to fully understand it until you're in that situation making those calls for yourself.
Yeah, and so I want to dive up into a bunch of that stuff today and that evolution. And you mentioned it, like maybe talk about my evolution as a sheep hunter. And I'm like, oh, now we've got the name of the podcast, and that's exactly, kind of what I wanted to get to is, some people. I think sometimes there's an unreasonable expectation that, hey, I'm going to go sheep hunting and I'm going to bring home a sheep, and it kind of doesn't work that way. You don't really. It's like you said, with deer or some other species, if you go to an area where there's high density, you're probably going to have a really good chance of converting. And sheep just isn't. It's just not like that. And it's interesting when you say you start in 08, 9, 10. There just wasn't a lot of resources out there. They're just like maybe there was the Hunting BC forum or a couple of forums, or maybe you go to Sheep Show, or to our show in Kamloops or wherever the case may be, talk to some sheep hunters. But there wasn't the resources. There wasn't endless podcasts back then. There wasn't webinars. There was really not a lot of things, resources. So you kind of had to figure it out on your own. Like, yeah, you'd talk to people and maybe get a little bit of insight, but there wasn't a ton of resources back in the day, I don't think.
No, no, you're absolutely right. There was nothing. Um, Yeah, for like I mentioned before, it was pretty much just going out, and it seemed at the time like you're kind of beating your head against the rock over and over doing the same things, and then it would just change. We dream about it for 350 days a year, and you have all this knowledge and planning, and it builds and builds and builds, and then you get to just practice everything that you've dreamed and you've learned for 14 days. And then if it works, that's great, and if it doesn't, usually it doesn't, then you've got 350 days to lick your wounds, say, well, that was stupid. I'm not doing that again, and learn from your mistakes. Like I mentioned, we started in kind of 08, 09 or so. We ended up actually the first ram harvest that I was on, we actually double headed on some really beautiful rams in 2012. And that was just an absolute fluke. Like, even though we've been doing it for 3 or 4 years at that time, we had no right shooting those sheep. Looking back, the whole even thinking about age, that wasn't even there because, we just weren't in the circles that educated you about shooting mature sheep, right? We were just looking, is it over its nose? If it's over its nose, we're going to kill it. Um, but over time of doing that, and then, finding about the Wild Sheep Society of BC, the education that there was out there at that time, which isn't even a fraction of what it is now. But just meeting the members and the people that have done it for a long time. Sheep hunting is such an addiction. When you find a sheep hunter, you are connected so much, and there's nothing like talking about sheep with someone that loves talking with sheep. So then you start learning and learning, and then, when you're in the circles, your knowledge does go up exponentially. So we found that definitely helped. From 2012 to 2016, we definitely started doing more, going farther, going longer, maybe a couple trips a year. And then in 2016, it kind of all started to click. And, from 2016, 2017, 2018, pretty much every year until last year, there's been some form of success in the mountains. And every single year, even though you think you got it mastered or you might know something, you learn something or something that's worked for years, you think, oh, we'll just do that. And then it blows apart. And everything that you kind of thought about didn't really plan out the way you thought it would.
Yeah, there's always the planning aspect where you have in your brain what's going to happen, and then the stuff that really happens when you land that get off the float plane or you get off the you get off the jet boat or whatever the case may be, right?
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Um, I mean, I can speak a little bit to kind of I would say one of the big things that everyone, when you're starting sheep hunting, everyone will say, and it's kind of funny because we want more people to sheep hunt. It's good for Wild Sheep Society. It's good for the community. the more the merrier. But at the same time, more sheep hunters on the mountain is maybe a little bit more competition. So it's 6 one, half dozen of the other. But the people that are out there, you really want to look at what we have now. The education through Wild Sheep Society BC, things like Spike Camp and the amount of knowledge being freely shared there is just astronomical. And that evolution of a sheep hunter, when they say that it's going to take you 7, 8, 9, 10 years to shoot your first ram, people say that, but I don't think they actually think about that. You're going to be spending the money and the time to go out for years and years and years. And if you're anything like me, the first couple of years, you didn't even see a stone sheep ewe. But if you consistently do it and put those pieces together, it will get more enjoyable. But then it'll come a point where you just want to kill a ram. Like it happens with everyone. When you're out there, you go from having these high and mighty expectations to if it's legal, we're killing it, right? And even I went through that. I shot my first ram in 2017, and at that time I put in years and years. It was almost 10 years really since I started hunting, maybe a little less than that. And he's absolutely my picture perfect dream ram. I've shot a few of them, but my first ram is just perfect. And I had that mindset of I just wanted to shoot a sheep, and it turned out to be perfect. But in the years to follow that, I've gone on so many different sheep hunts, and I've helped other people harvest their first rams, and even harvested a couple more. And it's funny that evolution that goes from you want to shoot one to you're almost so happy just seeing them on the mountain that if it's not exactly what you want, just pack up and let it go. You could come back next year, that ram's going to have an extra age ring, or worst case scenario, someone else takes their first ram, and if it's a legal ram, that's good for them too.
Yeah, that's absolutely sage advice. Let's talk a little bit about you had that first sheep hunt, where you guys started. And let's talk about that evolution, some of the things that you learned along the way, and maybe some of the things, some takeaways that maybe somebody that is just starting out or been on the mountain a few times and hasn't had success. Some of the things that you learned along the way. And the one thing that I was hoping to explore a little bit tonight is that like the mindset and the mental aspect of it. You think you do something for 10 years before you take that ram. That's a huge commitment. Anyone doing 10 years of anything is a bloody long time, let alone trying to harvest a ram. Like that's a lot of hard work and dedication and commitment and money. So maybe just touch a little bit on your evolution, your personal evolution, and then and you can talk about some of the things you learned if you want. Certainly just that made you a better hunter, but I want to explore the mental aspect of it too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the mental aspect of hunting sheep is hands down the hardest, right? It's been talked about in other podcasts. There's no way to mentally train for a sheep hunt. You can physically train, and, touching briefly on that, people have all different ways to train for a sheep hunt. And I guess it kind of varies where you live, but the easiest way is put your backpack on, put weight in it, and walk with it. Like that's when people ask how to get ready for it. First of all, buy your hunting boots early. Like if you don't have your hunting boots already, you might as well wait till next year, because you don't want to go on a sheep hunt with new boots. Put them on, put your pack on, put weight in it. You don't need a ton of weight, and just walk. That's the biggest thing. And when you are training and going for those walks, make it a mental game, right? Do that if you're doing the same route over and over and over, then push yourself another 5 minutes without taking that break. Push yourself another 15 minutes. Just the other day, I did a training hike above my place, and I took all the weight out of my pack. So I had an empty pack, and I just wanted to see how far up the mountain I could go until I stopped. And I got way farther than I actually thought I would. And that's such a mental bonus, because you actually see yourself and the conditioning that you've done, and you feel really good. So it's kind of those mental mental positive or mental wins, I guess, as far as training goes. When you're on the mountain, um, first and foremost, I mean, like we talked about before, you're dreaming about that for 350 days. You're in a place that people from around the world would spend tens of thousands of dollars to go and see. And for us BC residents, we're pretty lucky because we can just hop in a plane or a boat or horses or hike right off the highway and go to those places. So if you just look at it like you are on a bit of a vacation, you just have to enjoy every single day that you're out there. Um, it can be horrendous on the mountain. In 2019, my hunting partner and I, we hiked all the way in and we got snowed on for like 48 hours. It snowed like 2 feet. And it got to a point where it was, maybe even a little bit dangerous. But if you just continue to stay positive as much as you can, within reason, you still want to have maybe your in reach pretty close by if things get too hairy. But remain positive, just enjoy your time out there and don't have that attitude like you need to kill something, right? We didn't have that to start because we knew we were absolutely clueless. But over the years that you're out there, like we talked about, if you're spending that money year after year after year, you do want to come home with a ram sooner or later. But everyone remembers their first. You only get one first. Make it something you want, right? Just because it's over its nose. For some people, if you're happy with that, legal's legal. That's awesome. But if you enjoy sheep hunting, if you know you're going to be out there year after year in the future, then look for something that really turns your crank, right? Just have that positive aspect, even about the animals that we're hunting.
Yeah, that's sage advice. Absolutely. Um, Tell us a little bit about your perspective, how it changed on what you were interested in taking. I think you talked a little bit about the first year you didn't feel a ton of pressure, maybe those early days, but then sort of at some point you're like, no, 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 we need to get this done now. And were you willing to, like, you still killed I think you said you shot a 39 plus inch ram, so that kind of ticked the box in terms of quality of ram. But were you willing to sort of, make more sacrifices than you normally would, sort of saying, okay, I need to go home with something one of these times?
I think mentally, I was getting to that point. Um, in your head, everyone's got their picture perfect ram, whether it's a big heavy broomer or a big tipped out twister. I was looking for that quintessential stone sheep, that big twisty stone, and that's really what I wanted. Um, but yeah, after that many years, if it was a legal ram, I kind of told myself I was going to take it. Fortunately, the ram I ended up shooting, he was, an older, big tipped out twister. So he checked all the boxes. Um, I shot that ram, like I said, in 2017. After that, I helped a couple other people shoot sheep. And then throughout that period too, there was more emphasis really put on shooting older, more mature rams for that sustainable harvest. So just as a hunter, me personally, when you start going into it and really studying the benefits of shooting those mature rams, that's a little bit more what I was interested in shooting. A few years later, on that same trip that we got snowed in, we were looking at my hunting partner and I. We were looking at two rams on the mountain. One was a smoking huge 7-year-old. He didn't break the bridge of his nose, so he wasn't legal, but he was tremendous, like a book ram. And with him was an 8-year-old who was over his nose on one side, broomed on the other side. We'd just been snowed into our tent for 48 hours. When the snow broke, we were dumb enough, instead of hiking back out to the river, we thought this is beautiful. It's sheep hunting weather. So we got all our crap together and we hiked up the mountain and we hunted these rams in the snow and we got on them. And it was pretty much our last designated day of sheep hunting. And we both looked at that ram. We both had rams at that point. And, it helps when you got a 170 class 7-year-old standing beside that 150 class 8-year-old. Because we kind of looked at him and we thought, you know what? That's not a ram that we want to shoot. It would be cutting that tag and taking it off the mountain. You get to post a picture and feel good about it and have a bunch of people slap you on the back. But when you bring it to the taxidermist and it's sitting on your wall forever, that's just not something that we wanted to have. So, it was a successful trip at that point. Patted each other on the backs, walked back down to the river. And on that walk down to the river, we stopped for a quick break. And we were pretty darn close to our base camp, and we looked up on the mountain and there was more sheep, and we looked and there was a big heavy ram. So we dumped our stuff off, ran up the mountain, and we looked at that second ram for, I think we were on him for about 3 hours at 250 yards. And he was a big, heavy, double broomed ram. And this was years, probably, yeah, at least 4 or 5 years into really kind of learning to age rams. And we watched that ram for like 3 hours before we got an age on him. And I ended up harvesting that ram. And, we knew he was old enough. I knew I kind of guessed he was in that 10 range. But when we talk about aging, a quick little lesson was that ram had 13 visible rings, but only 10 of them were true. And that's what really wigs you out, because we were sure that he was over 8 and he had, a good margin of error on that. But we knew there was false ones, but really until you get up there and hold that ram in your hand, you don't know exactly how many false rings are on those stone sheep's horns. So that was pretty interesting. That was kind of a pat on the back for maybe letting that 8-year-old go. That we ended up harvesting a much older ram on that trip. But yeah, it's just about taking the time, really being a student of the game, learning to age, and being really happy with you're taking an animal's life. That's not something to be taken lightly. And they should be old, and you should be happy with them.
Awesome. Just so many great things in there. Touch a little bit for us on you taking that 10-year-old ram, which wasn't above the nose and was like obviously really challenging with the false annuli. One of the hardest things to do in sheep hunting right there. That's exactly what it is. It's trying to, you got what looks like a mature ram. You've got false annuli. There's false annuli. He's not past the nose. So now you actually have to really do your homework. Talk about the decisions that were made on that hunt, having hunted sheep for 10 plus years versus the early days, those first 2 or 3 years. And do you think you could have got yourself in your first year or two to the point where you'd feel comfortable pulling the trigger on a ram like that?
Oh, the short answer is absolutely not. And anyone after a year or two of stone sheep hunting or sheep hunting period that thinks that they could accurately, judge a ram, a double broomed ram with false annuli throughout his whole horn very accurately, you're really splitting hairs. Like it is very difficult. In previous podcasts, you've had guides on the show that talk about aging a ram off of pictures or you got it in your hands. That's relatively simple. You can turn it around back. You can put your fingers in the cracks. You can see which one's real and which one's not. Like I mentioned, we sat on that ram at 250 yards for 3 hours in the howling wind. And you look at that stupid ram for 30 minutes at a time while it's bedded, facing away from you, and the sun's not right. The wind is almost blowing your spotting scope over. You're cold. He gives you the perfect look when you're, taking a drink or having a leak or something. So it's so hard in order to get that, that perfect age on it. I've hunted, like you said, probably for around 10 years before. And even counting that, I mean, we thought we had an age on him after an hour. We didn't shoot him after an hour. We waited. He got up and fed. We counted him again. He laid down. He got up. We counted him again. And I think that's something that people really have to do is there can be zero guesswork in thinking a ram is legal or thinking he's 8 years old. That podcast that you recently did with Mike Bridger talking about, making sure they're old enough and over the nose, that's ingenious. That takes all the stress out of it, right? Because then you're not getting in trouble for shooting an illegal ram. And ideally, you're shooting one that's legal both ways, an old ram and over the nose. I think that's what more and more people should really start to do, especially people that are just starting sheep hunting. If you've been doing it for 10 years and you want to go out there and you want to shoot a double broomed ram and you have those skills from a decade of going to the sheep show, holding rams, aging rams, talking with guides, listening to all the tips and tricks, well, that's your prerogative. And, there's a lot of people out there that are very good at aging sheep. So there's a lot of people every year that are going to do it. But if you think in the first 2, 3, 4, 5 years that you can go out there and accurately age a big, nasty, double broomed ram, that's a stressful position that I wouldn't want to put myself in.
Yeah, and it's so much easier to walk away than to show up at the CO service and lose your animal, right? And because you misjudged it. It's that's a pretty humbling thing, I think. Um, if you don't mind, Caden, can you talk a little bit about, what are some of the big changes in, like, what did you evolve in your hunting um, over the years, that you think back your first couple of years and then to where you started being successful on the mountain? Maybe talk about, like, you talked about getting off on the wrong side of the river, like just selecting the areas, maybe a little bit of your glassing techniques. One thing that resonated with me, and I'm sure this is part of it, is you just start hiking further. And you notice that the guys that are willing to go a little further than the other guys, they tend to get into sheep a little bit more readily. Not that you need to always be moving. We've heard that lots on the podcast, where you don't necessarily need to be moving all the time, but you need to get to where there are sheep, and that might be a 3-day hike from the lake instead of a 1-day hike.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And yeah, you don't always have to hike farther. Just a couple of years ago, we were trying to find my father-in-law a ram, and we hiked all the way back to the mountains that we knew held sheep, like a 3-day, 2-day hike back. Got there, and there was a whole bunch of really young rams, nothing, nothing legal, and we looked all the way back towards the river, and there was some big, heavy rams living right above the river. So probably like 4 hours away from the jet boat. So that would have saved us a lot of steps had you taken your time. And I think that's a big thing in of itself is take your time, right? It's a kind of a balance between walking far and walking hard. You want to be physically in shape, you want to be mentally in shape, but don't just thunder through the mountains because sheep are where sheep are. Like there's no actual single spot that's going to hold the big rams. They move, and the biggest rams are shot off the hillsides where no one thought that there was sheep because no one took the time. So as you're going along, we found, every single time that you stop for a water break, that, you stop for a breather, sit down, pull up your binos. We've all got chest harnesses for our binos. It takes 30 seconds. Look over the nearest grassy slope. Look at the peaks around you. Just take time. It'll make your hike more enjoyable. You'll see more. And yeah, you might find that ram a lot closer to your starting point than you thought. As far as some other techniques for going back along the lines of taking your time is, a lot of guys, they'll want to go into a basin and they'll look at that basin for a morning or an afternoon. We've been pretty fortunate over the years to watch those basins for a couple days even. You don't have to sit there for 48 hours straight, but if you can position yourself somewhere where it might be a short hike or you know, you never want to be sitting up on the ridge top, otherwise everything will see you. But if you can kind of get somewhere where you can watch one basin for the morning, hop over the peak and glass the backside for the latter half of the morning, go back in the afternoon, glass that first basin over and over, those rams, they just move. They're just constantly moving. So there's a lot of old time sheep hunters that they have the patience to just sit in one spot for 7 days. And they come out of the hills with rams every single year because you just wait for those sheep to come to you. Unfortunately, with most guys, we don't have the patience or maybe even the time to do that, but definitely taking your time, glassing. When it comes to, glassing, kind of a little caveat there is you don't need to have Swarovski binoculars, Swarovski spotting scope, Leica binoculars. Get whatever you can afford, but get the best that you can afford, right? It just makes it easier to keep looking through that glass for hours and hours and hours because that's the only way you see those sheep. Um, I hunted with one fella for a few years and we'd roll over the top into a basin and he would glass for 20 minutes. And then I'd look over and he's having a nap or he's picking through his pack or he's doing something else. And, he was more than happy to help out, but he wasn't the guy looking through the binos. And more often than not, he wasn't the guy that spotted the sheep. So the only way you're going to spot them is by looking through. And the best that you can buy is the best that you can buy. So when it comes to gear, definitely I would put binoculars and a spotting scope far above buying a really expensive rifle because that rifle might get used once every couple of years if you're hunting sheep, if you're fortunate. But those optics are used all the time. So definitely taking your time, moving slow, glassing as much as you can. Um, the other thing I found over the years too, when you start learning how to sheep hunt, is every sheep that you see, take note of where they are. Take note of what they're doing. Where are they living? What aspect of the mountain are they living on? How close to rocks are they? Are they out in these big high alpine flats or are they closer to the rocks? Are they on the north side, the south side? What's kind of the weather like? What time of year are you hunting these sheep and where are they? Because over years, just mentally, you build that catalog of, well, that looks rammy. And it's hard to describe what a rammy mountain or a sheepy mountain looks like. But over time, if you go out and you see these sheep in that spot, well, now you go to a new spot, you're hiking through and you look up and you say, man, that looks like a really sheepy basin. Maybe instead of looking at it for 15 or 20 minutes, maybe you pull out the spotting scope and sit there for a couple hours and really pull it apart. And that lends itself with time in the mountains, but just be really observant to the sheep that you do see, even if you don't see any big rams on your trip, even if you see, a band of young rams, just take note of where they are and what they're doing. And over time, that knowledge builds, and sooner or later, you're going to see that band of crankers.
Awesome. Really, really good insight there. Um, let's talk a little bit about the mental aspect. I remember my first sheep hunt, and it was just, you train, you mentally, you have, you're like, yeah, I'm ready. I know I can go and do this. And then you get off the airplane and you start hiking, and you're like, oh, like, and it kind of hits you. And I think there's that Jack O'Connor saying that, the sheep hunter, your first time sheep hunting, it's either, basically you fall in love with it or you'll never be seen on the mountain again. I'm bastardizing that, so apologize. But talk a little bit about that aspect for you, and because I do, you do hear every year of somebody that it was like they get on the mountain, they're just done. They just can't do it. They just mentally and obviously they can, but they've convinced themselves they can't. So you talked about how the mental aspect is the toughest aspect of sheep hunting, and I concur. I totally agree. There's been years I've been in amazing shape, and there's been years that I've been not in amazing shape, but it was always the mental aspect that was the most restrictive by far. So touch a little bit on that and some of the strategies that you've used over the years to push through, and because for example, you talked about the bad weather experience, right? Where a lot of guys would have got the break from the snow, this massive blizzard after 48 hours, and just got off the mountain. And then there's the sheep hunters that go out there and they get on rams, and they didn't find the ram there. They go get on rams somewhere else and kill a ram. Those are the guys that are getting it done. Go through that aspect, and then your evolution from those early days to where you're at now.
Yeah. I think first of all, like sheep hunting isn't for everyone. Obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, it's probably you want to be a sheep hunter or you are a sheep hunter. But you don't have to love sheep hunting. For the people that do and they want to be out there year after year, there's probably a reason why. They enjoy the mountains. They enjoy the sheep that call those mountains home. And there's definitely a lot of enjoyment. I'd say 90% of the enjoyment of that trip is from just being out there. And when you enjoy being out there, it makes everything so much easier. Now, there's always going to be days that suck, days that you know, it's just piss and rain all day. You're soaking wet. It's freezing. Um, but when you kind of look at it like it's your holiday and you make yourself enjoy it, that that helps you stay on the mountain a little bit more. Last year, actually, I'll tell a quick story here. Last year, my dad and I went out sheep hunting, and my father, he's fortunate enough that his very first ram is a picture perfect mid 170s stone, and he could have probably just hung him up after that. Never hunted stone sheep again. He always makes the joke that he'll probably never shoot one that big again in his life. But he was going out and just to see what was on the mountain. And he told me that the only thing that he wanted to shoot was a double broomed ram. He hasn't found a double broom ram. So that was it. That is all that he wanted to shoot, and I wasn't shooting a stone sheep. So we packed up, headed north, and when we got there, as soon as we got in there, the weather turned crappy. And we've been blessed with, for the most part, pretty good weather for most of our sheep hunts. I mean, it's always rolling the dice when you're going up there. But for the next 10 days, we probably had 1 day or 2 days that it wasn't blowing 100 miles an hour. And we always stay on top of the mountain. And that was probably one of the hardest hunts that we've ever done because we were in an area where we knew sheep would be, and we just got pounded day after day after day. But being with someone that you enjoy spending time with, first of all, makes it a lot easier. So when it comes to mental positivity, find someone else who's mentally positive. If you're up there with someone who's nitpicking about everything, they're cold, they're wet, they're miserable. I mean, either you're going to be up there alone or you're going to end up burying your sheep hunting partner up there. So, so that definitely helps. But we stayed up there for numerous days, and we ended up finding a ram the mountain over where we kind of figured that we'd find him. And at first, when I spotted him, I thought that is a double broomed ram. He was bedded thick in the thick buckbrush, and we watched him and we watched him and watched him, and all we saw around him was ewes. He was surrounded by like 40 different ewes, but he was the only ram. We knew he was super, super heavy, but just he was a ways away, and with the way the light was, we couldn't get a good look. But he ended up getting up, and he was with one smaller ram. There's just two rams and 40 to 50 ewes. And as the sun set, he walked up to the ridge, and he was perfectly silhouetted. And he's probably one of the biggest stone sheep I've ever seen in my entire life. And he had perfect lamb tips on both sides, horn curl that went right down to his chin. He was heavy, he was over his nose, and he tipped out. And I looked at Dad, my jaw hit the ground, and I said, that's a book ram. Like, you have to kill that thing. We're out here getting beat up for days and days and days. And we were super happy that we found that ram. And Dad said, we'll go back to the tent and think about it. And I kind of thought, like, what's there to think about? And we sat in the tent that night, had our dinner, and Dad said, well, I want to see him tomorrow. So again, we thundered out there tomorrow, the next day, and we watched him and watched him. And Dad looked at me and he said, you know what? That's not a double broom ram. I've got my big ram. I want something that, really turns my crank. I only came out here for one thing, and we're leaving that ram on the mountain. And I mentally made up my mind that I wasn't shooting a stone sheep on that trip. So we just watched that ram for the next 3 days. He just lived on that mountain with all his girlfriends, and we never even hiked over there to shoot that ram. And now looking back, it's a little bit, maybe I'm kicking myself because that would have dwarfed my ram. He was definitely, I think he was a very good one. But we both got off that hunt. We were happy that we saw something, and we were even happier that that ram is still out there. So someone is going to shoot a tremendously special ram, and you know what? We can be happy that we let that ram go to someone else that's going to enjoy him just as much or more than we were.
Uh, that's that's pretty amazing, I have to say. That's pretty serious dedication to sticking with. So what would have convinced you that you had to take that ram? What would have, is there anything that would have, you would have been like, oh, okay, I've changed my mind?
For me, no. I've shot a few stones, and I'm holding my tag for a different species. So that's that. And Dad was dead set on a double broomed ram. But Dad just texted me the other day as we're getting all revved up for sheep season, and he said that every time he looks back at the pictures and videos we have of it, it might be bigger than his current one. So he's he was kind of kicking himself too. But it's a funny
Right.
story to look back on, right? You can always, a sheep hunter isn't made by the amount of sheep on your wall. It's the amount of sheep that you let go. That is really something to be said for that. People that are going out and shooting sheep every single year, um, if they're big old rams, that's awesome, but you don't need to be doing that. It's not like shooting a whitetail or a muley around home. They're a pretty special animal, and they should be definitely given that respect.
Awesome. Um, Take us back to that first ram that you took. So you've been hunting for close to 10 years. Um, Talk about sort of your mental experience on taking that ram and what that was like for you.
Yeah, that was a really interesting trip. Like you said, we were at it for quite a few years. Um, it was beautiful weather on that trip. On our way back into the mountains, we actually ended up shooting a big 6 point bull elk on our way into the mountains. So most people don't usually do that. It's probably not advised. But the fact that we had a whole bunch of meat, a beautiful 6 point, and we kind of enjoyed a day, that really puts you, obviously. I mean, your trip is a success any way you cut it when you're coming out of the mountains with that. So we were pretty jazzed up about that. We got back there. Weather was good. We weren't seeing a whole ton on that particular trip, but I just had this weird feeling, and I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was some sort of weird dream or premonition or something, but I just knew that we were going to see rams in this particular basin. And we got up there, and the wind was howling one night. The temperature actually dropped right off, and there was three of us. We were sitting, watching, watching, watching. And Dad said, you know what, let's pack up, head back to camp for the night. And I was a little bit stubborn. I said, you go down there. Like, I can see the tent. It's on the other end of the mountain. I'll see you back there in a couple hours. And he said, well, you're not staying alone. I said, well, I'm not going back to the tent. So I'm just going to sit here till it gets dark, and I'll walk back. And we sat there, and it got really cold. And right before dark, we looked down, and this line of rams came walking right out of the timber at the bottom. They were right down in the timber. And that's another thing, talking about uh, knowledge, that everyone thinks sheep live right at the top of the mountain. Stone sheep spend so much time down deep in the timber. If if you really, start glassing down low, you'll see way more sheep than you think. And yeah, these rams came out, and right away we could spot that there was a big, heavy old twister ram in there. And there was an even heavier one with him that he was, a little bit short of his nose, but he was coming, pardon me, right around. And yeah, we watched him. It got dark pretty quick. We got some pictures of him. Obviously, you're pretty jazzed up, pretty happy that you found these sheep after days and days of looking and not seeing a whole lot. So go back to camp. Um, First thing in the morning, before it was light, we thundered out to where we thought those sheep were, and they were bedded all over this open knob. And we were paying attention, but they were even a lot farther up than we thought. And one of the young rams, he spotted us right away. We were about 400 or 500 yards away, and he's just blended right into the rocks. And he spotted us, and we kind of stopped and waited. And the one sheep hunting partner that we were with, he's shot a few sheep, and he just said basically just stay low, don't look at them, don't walk directly at them, but let's just walk 50 yards and then we're out of sight. And I thought that was the dumbest thing ever. I thought that ram's gonna see us, he's gonna tell all his buddies, and they're gonna just turn into, dust in no time. But I listened to Buddy, and we put our head down, we came around the far side of that ridge, and to my surprise and delight, none of those rams had moved at all. That young ram, he hadn't been chased a whole lot, obviously, by hunters, so he had nothing to worry about. We weren't close enough that he really stressed out. We poked over, and yeah, there was a dozen or 16 rams all bedded across the hillside, and a couple legal ones with them. So as far as mental, there was definitely some ups and downs, but if you get enough ups through the trip, if you focus on the positives and the things that are going your way, it'll carry you right on to the next one. If something really crappy happens, as long as you're safe and nothing's ruined, just laugh about it. And tomorrow is always another day. Tomorrow will be better. You're going to see that ram tomorrow. And if you don't see him tomorrow, keep lying to yourself and say it's going to be the next day and the next day. Because one thing's for sure, you're sure as hell never going to see a ram if you're not out there. So just keeping yourself out there and staying as positive as you can, that's the only way to kill them. You look at all the people that shoot rams year after year after year, there's years that go by without them seeing a legal ram. So don't be stressed out if every single moment of the hunting trip isn't a highlight reel, because they're not going to be. It's probably more packed with blisters and sore legs, and you're thirsty and you smell like crap and you're sweaty and you're cold. So if you're into that, then you're going to be a great sheep hunter.
Make it sound pretty attractive. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome. Let's touch a little bit on the evolution of your gear. So you think of the early days of what you're using, and not really looking at anything specifically, but just kind of what are some of the biggest takeaways or changes you've made in terms of your gear now that as opposed to sort of those early days when you started sheep hunting?
Yeah. So gear has seemed to come a long ways in a pretty short amount of time. When we first started going out, I had Irish setter elk tracker, leather boots, I had wool pants, and I had a Tatanka pack frame. I think when I was headed up the mountain, even without water, I was probably like 75 or 80 pounds. And I thought that was as lightweight as I physically could get. But a caveat to any of this gear is, just like I said with optics, just buy the best you can, right? We killed a lot of animals with that old gear, and there's guys that have been shooting sheep and elk in blue jeans and muck boots for years and years. But the better gear makes it a little bit easier for you. So boots, you just want to pick the most comfortable boot that you can. I never tell people what boots that they should be running, because everyone's foot's different. And there's so many great boot makers out there, whether it's, Mendel's, Hanweg's, Zamberlin's, Scarpa's, Crispy's. There's a million of them. So just try them, find what is comfortable for you, because your boots are probably the most important piece of clothing, apparel that you can have for a long period of time because you're on your feet every day, all day. When it comes to clothing, you don't need a whole lot. There's people that pack multiples of everything. You're not out there to win any fashion shows, and you're just out there to stay alive and stay as comfortable as possible. So, a couple pairs of socks. I personally kind of like I've been using Darn Tough socks. They're wool socks. For a number of years, you pack a base layer when it gets cold. Some people like merino wool, some people like synthetic. I ran wool for a number of years. I've kind of switched over to synthetic, and I'm trying that. You have a pair of hunting pants that, they might come off a couple times for the entire trip. So you want to find something comfortable as far as hunting pants goes. Every big company has their, top of the line, all round hunting pant. And if you can't afford that, then I've done August trips in an Under Armour outdoor pant. That was more than comfortable. Rain gear, make sure you got a jacket and pants. Back in the day, I had this heavy, heavy rain gear that would not pack down. It was like an entire pack of my Tatanka was this stupid, like almost rubber rain gear. And then when it did rain, you were just as wet with it on as with it off. So it really didn't do anything. But there's so many good types of rain gear out there now. And one thing actually that we kind of adopted a little bit later was we always had like an insulation layer, a puffy jacket. But for years and years, we'd never had puffy pants. We would always just pack like an extra set of, merino long underwear, kind of a heavyweight long underwear. And then we'd throw our rain pants over top of that to try to cut some wind. But I think 2019, we got on it a little late. Probably 2018 or 2019, we started packing puffy pants, and those are an absolute game changer. When it comes to staying comfortable on the mountain, wind, it's always blowing at the top of the mountain. So you hike all the way up there, you're all sweaty. Even a warm day, as soon as that sun goes down, it can get cold really fast. You put on those puffy pants. I like the ones that zip up on the side because then you don't have to take your boots off. And you can just sit there and you're so comfortable it's pretty much like being cozied up in your sleeping bag. And then when it does get really cold, lots of times, I don't even take my gear off at night. It's not the most comfortable thought to think about. But if you climb in your sleeping bag with all your gear on, if you're a little bit damp, by the morning, you feel dry. It's much easier to get out of your sleeping bag when you're fully clothed and you're dry rather than trying to put this wet gear on you. So as far as clothes, that's kind of what we've adopted over the last couple of years. Binos, spotting scope. It's all pretty straightforward. A pack, make sure whatever pack you get, there's a million of them that are really comfortable. Make sure it's just comfortable with weight in it. Some of these packs are comfy with 20 or 30 pounds, but throw 50, 60, 70 pounds in it and at least make sure it's never going to be awesome coming off the mountain fully loaded, but make sure it's just not really rubbing you the wrong way because that can make for a long pack out.
Wow, lots to unpack there, man. It's awesome. Lots to talk about. Very cool. Um, what's on the agenda for this fall? I think you said you had a different species of sheep in mind, maybe that was back a few years ago. But what are you guys planning this fall?
Yeah, this year is I'm taking my brother-in-law and I are going out. He's never shot a stone sheep before. Back in 2023, when we found a ram for my father-in-law, he shot a big old double broomed 9-year-old. And with that ram right beside him, after we killed that ram, there was a really beautiful, tipped out, over his nose 7-year-old. And I looked at my brother and Hayden and I said, he's over his nose. You haven't shot a ram. It's up to you. At this point, he's shot a pretty tremendous old 9-year-old bighorn. So mentally, he said that, he wouldn't have been happy with that 7-year-old stone hanging by his 9-year-old bighorn. So he let him walk. We spent the night on the mountain. And in the morning, when my father-in-law and my dad packed out that ram, me and my brother-in-law hiked back to the top of the mountain to get the rest of our gear, which we left on top of the mountain. And as soon as we crested that hill, all those rams from the band that we just killed that ram out of, they were bedded at like 20 yards. They all jumped up and they just stood there. I got a video on my phone of Hayden putting the gun up, racking one in, and all I said was, "That's the same ram from yesterday." And it was totally his call, and he watched and watched, and I heard the safety go back on, and he unloaded, and that ram just stood there at 20 yards for like 30 seconds before leaving. So he's let one walk a couple times, and he's due for a big old stone this year. So yeah, that's what we're gonna go uh in August for that. And I've had a 12-year-old or a 12-year quest of trying to find a bighorn sheep for me. That's kind of where I'm at right now.
Awesome. Are you going to go chase bighorns this fall, or are you? What's the plan there?
Yeah, I think so. Talking about mental game changing. Um, I started hunting bighorn sheep roughly the same time, maybe a couple of years later than hunting stone sheep. And again, it was you just want to kill anything that's legal. And looking back, we were again so clueless. I got pictures of a couple rams that now I'm looking back and thinking, why the heck didn't I kill that ram? Like that's just ridiculous. But I'm almost at a point where, I have yet to harvest a bighorn sheep. I've seen some really tremendous rams. And over the last few years, I've passed numerous rams that have met that legal requirement, but I just didn't think that I wanted on my wall. And I'm at a point now where I think when I finally do kill one, it's it's going to be bittersweet because I've been hunting these animals for so long. I almost don't want this quest to end. I mean, I'm sure my wife probably wants it to end relatively soon, but she likes coming out with me. I kid there. But yeah, one day I'll find the right one, and I think it's only going to take one.
That's awesome. Yeah, very cool. Um, One thing I wanted to touch base on was, are you an early season guy, late season guy, or are you an any time of year guy? And there's people that exclusively hunt the opener, people that hunt late, they prefer it. Where do you kind of sit on that timeline of things?
Yeah, I've had multiple trips in the early, mid, and late. I think for most people, a lot of guys want to hunt opener because the weather is generally warmer. But sometimes it's so warm that hunting in 25, 30-degree weather sucks anyways. Like if you shoot something, you're going to be super stressed about the meat, the cape. Bugs are super bad, but the chances of getting snow in August in the first little bit is pretty low. They're never zero, but generally your weather's a lot better. I personally, we almost exclusively hunt in September. Um, I like September hunting a lot because over the years, I find that most of the time in August, even though the weather is warmer, you get a lot more precipitation. You get a lot of rain days. You're hunkered down, sitting in your tent for days and days. In September, usually in that early little bit, I find more often than not, the weather is actually really good. Most of the days are nice and, warm. Could be up to, we've had days 20, 25 degrees in the second, third week of September. Um, but also the nights cool off enough. There's no bugs. If you do shoot something, when it does cool down at night, you're not really worried about your meat near as much. And then, going back to my roots, it's pretty tough to beat September in the mountains when the elk are screaming all over. And, we do a lot of sheep hunting, But whenever we're up there hunting for sheep, there's always the last couple days when we're coming out that we're trying to pound elk also. It kind of makes the trip worth a little bit more in terms of meat and filling the freezer. And if you've ever been there when a big bull elk is charging up to you, bugling, nothing. There's there's not a lot of sheep that get the heart going like that.
Yeah, no, that I agree with you. The bugle coming in is something to behold if you've never experienced that. Bone chilling sometimes.
It is.
Just want to kind of ask you a little deep question here. Since your generation a little younger than my generation, I'm a little younger than Kyle's generation. Uh, what what do you want the next generation of sheep hunters to kind of understand that maybe you didn't? Because I know every generation changes. Like I know I'm substantially different than my father. My son's already substantially different than I am. What are your? I know it's kind of a loaded one to end on here.
Yeah, I think with where sheep hunting is right now and the amount of people that are flocking to it, it's, getting to be a pretty um, popular hunt, popular, maybe some people would call it a sport. The new people entering into it, you can't hope to just catapult straight into being a great sheep hunter. It is all about enjoying that process. Enjoy being a junior sheep hunter. Enjoy just starting out. Enjoy your time in the mountains. If you're just out there looking to kill a ram, this isn't for you. And, you're not doing the population any any favors. And really, we've all met those people that are out there and they're starting out and they're just looking to kill something and they're asking all the wrong questions and they rub a lot of people the wrong way. So for all the people just getting into it, get into it, right? It's awesome if like Kyle said, when you're out there, you either know you're a sheep hunter or you're not. If you are, it's an awesome journey, but it is a journey. So just enjoy your time. Get involved with, the Wild Sheep Society. Go to the banquets. I wish that I had years and years ago. I look back and think of all the years where it was a lot closer to home for me than maybe it is now, and all the people that I've met there. It's just such a tremendous community and get involved in the community rather than just trying to take an animal for yourself. Help give back and you'll enjoy that journey so much more. And the more you're around it, the faster that learning process I think will grow. And another thing that I wanted to add is we've all been in the mountains and you're waiting for days and days to get back there and you hike into a bowl and there's a tent there, or you're hiking up the trail and you come across other people. That sucks. It's mentally demoralizing sometimes. But one thing that I have learned over the years is those people are there because they love doing the exact same thing that you spent all that time and effort to do. You have more in common with those people than 99% of people you walk by on your day-to-day life. And over the years, those people that I've met in the mountains have become some awesome friends and best buddies of mine down to this day. And if you treat them with respect, you get that respect and you're going to know people at these conventions. You're hunting in the same area in Zipper Lip Creek that they were, so they're in there for a reason. You're in there for a reason. And if you show guys that you're making the effort and you're putting out the respect, it's going to come back to you. And who knows, they might help you.
Yeah, I know that's sound advice. I know when I personally run into other hunters in the backcountry, especially if you're on a fly-in, like just got to go out of your way and go talk to the people.
You
Like
do. You got to rip
don't
off the Band-Aid.
yeah, don't try to hide from them. Just go talk to them. Even discuss your game plans. Give that a go. Like, you guys are going that way tomorrow. Okay, we'll go the opposite direction. We don't want to hunt on top of each other. Like you say, you make some great connections out there, surprisingly. It's just middle of nowhere, and now you got a best friend. But,
Yeah. Yeah, we had one area where we got off and we got in. There's a couple guys there. One guy that was super talkative was more than happy to tell you about all his accomplishments. And me and my dad are just kind of sitting there and we're kind of thinking like, all right, well, I don't know where they're going, don't know where we're going. But his this other fella's hunting partner was just this really quiet, older. He looked like a wolf. Like he's wearing like a Stansfield wool sweater. He had this old beat up gun, and I just knew. I thought, oh, that's bad news for any sheep in the area. And we both took off in different directions. We came back. We actually came back with a really nice ram, and they came back without a ram. We kind of had some previous knowledge of the area, so we had a little one up on them. But we sat around the fire for the next 3 days, hunting elk together, and boy, oh boy, those guys are some of our best buddies now. And that one fella has killed a lot of sheep in his day. And man, oh man, was it ever a privilege to meet him in the mountains and to call him a buddy.
that's awesome. If you, if you knew your next hunt would be your last, what are you going for and why?
That's a tough one.
That's what we're here for.
You know what? We can see a lot. I've got to see a lot in BC. I spent some time in the Yukon growing up when I was younger. But I've never really been back in those mountains. So probably if I could go back there and, hunt white sheep in the Yukon or the Northwest Territories, maybe throw in a big bull moose. If I had one hunt left, that would probably top it off.
You know what? That's you put in the work for your last one.
That's right.
Awesome. I don't know if Kyle's got any other questions for you, but I, from myself and kind of on behalf of the society, like I want to thank you for your dedication and your volunteering and all your support that you give us. You're one of those guys that is behind the scenes, but you're always here to support, and you're an outstanding individual. And thank you for your time.
Appreciate that, guys. And thank you guys for all your hard work.
Hey, Caden, why don't you throw a shout out to your uncle there that you guys did he did an amazing, well, first of all, you found a deadhead and then, got the permit for the society, acquired it, and then your uncle built this incredible um, lamp is not the right word for it. That sounds like something you buy at a shop, and it's a piece of work, artwork. It's incredible. But just talk a little bit about that experience, and because that is such a beautiful piece.
Yeah, that's a truly one of a kind piece. Yeah, my uncle from Hinton, Steve, he on Instagram is goes by Gunpowder Lighting. So if anyone wants to check out his work, look that up. He makes these specialty lights basically from whiskey bottles. Generally, you can make a light from kind of any bottle. So I was out on a hike and I found a big deadhead, and we were kind of thinking about, what could we do to do a special piece for the Sheep Society, and with all the whiskeys and the liquors that the society has put out in the last couple of years, I thought, wow, that would be a really cool light if we used one of their bottles and incorporated this deadhead ram into it. So yeah, after some work from Kyle, talking to the bios around here, we got the permit for it and put it up, and I think it generated some pretty good revenue for the society on that show. And yeah, those lights are one of a kind. They're pretty tremendous, and to have a sheep attached to it like that, that's truly one of a kind.
It's stunning, like unbelievable. It was beautiful, and it did really well. Yeah, it was a great fundraiser for us. So, just a shout out to Steve and you, and for you to have that vision to do that and to support the society on it, and then Steve to do the donation, and then he was at the show, which was super cool as well. So, just really grateful for you guys and all you've done to support the society. So, thank you for the donation, but more importantly, just, being one of the pillars of our community that, when I look at sheep hunters, it's guys like you that I want to emulate. You got the right message, the right drive, you're successful, you're humble. And that's the cool thing about our sheep community, BC. And don't get me wrong, I'm not limited to BC, but I think BC is pretty special, is that we just got a community of people that are really passionate. And there's names that, like, if I throw them out here, people be like, I don't know who that person is. They probably never met them, but they're walking around the sheep, like at our event at the Salute to Conservation, and they're killers, man. They go out every year and they kill giant rams, or they leave giant rams on the mountain. It's pretty inspiring when, the sort of BC sheep community is pretty special, in my opinion. Biased, but pretty special.
I'm with you, and that's the one show where you can meet people from all over, and they hunt BC, but they hunt all over the world, right? We all know those guys that they're big name hunters, but they're there supporting conservation. And you've maybe seen some of these guys on YouTube videos or shows, and maybe you got this this enlightened vision of them, and you can walk right up to them and talk to them, and every single one of them, they are guys just like you and me, and they're awesome to talk to, and more than that, they're happy to talk to you and pass that on to the next generation.
Yeah, awesome. Well, brother, thank you so much for all you do, for being on the podcast with us tonight. I've been trying to get you on for a long time, and just really glad you could do it. And I think this is very timely. We get this out and get people fired up for some giant rams on the mountain for this fall.
You betcha. Looking forward to it.
Awesome.